Hey, it's Yassine here. It's been a while since I've come to you with a podcast episode. You know, we're working really hard behind the scenes, brewing a new series, which will be coming out late April. However, I wanted to come out to you with an impromptu podcast because we had a very special guest who's visiting us here in our offices in the Philippines. And you see, when it comes to field service, a topic that's not nearly covered as much is go-to-market. How to grow your revenue, how to grow your sales, and especially if you're in an organization that's struggling with its go-to-market performance and you're not achieving that 20-30% revenue growth year over year, how do you turn around sales? How do you add high-octane sales to your organization to achieve the goals that you've set for your organization, or most likely your board has set for you? Well, to cover that, I'm excited for the first time on the Field Service Excellence podcast to cover this topic in detail with no one other than 𝗧𝗜𝗠𝗘𝗦𝗦. Jim, welcome to the show, my friend.
Nice to be here, mate.
Thank you for flying all the way from Australia.
Well, just for the podcast, obviously. Yeah.
Well, it's been an honor having you here. This is your second time to visit us.
Second time visiting you folks.
I hope we didn't disappoint.
No, it was awesome.
What's been the most exciting thing for you coming this second time around?
Well, I was going to say the food was good. It's just people. It's nice to see people again. You can catch up with people over Teams, but actually seeing people face to face. A few people gave me a hug. I'm not really a hugger, but sometimes you just got to go with it. So
Filipinos are very intimate. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today, Jim, because you're a go-to-market leader that I have a lot of respect for. And you come with extensive experience across multiple industries, and you're combining actually two very industries together, which is the BPO industry and the energy industry, and you're leveraging off of these two industry experiences that you have to really launch and scale go-to-market motion. So I'm really excited about digging in and sharing some of your wisdom with our audience today. But before we get into that, can you maybe give us a 60-second overview about your background?
So I lead solar sales for a big energy retailer in Australia. My background is fairly international. Time in Australia, time in the Philippines, time in the UK. I've worked in energy, I've worked in telco, I've worked in startups, generally always coming back to big people teams, whether that's sort of customer service, technical support, or most recently a lot of sales. So that's my background.
Yeah, no, that's quite impressive. And why energy? Why did you decide to? You were in energy before, right? And now you decided to now get into not just the oil and gas side, but really the renewable energy. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what your thought process there.
So I don't want to get on the soapbox, but climate change is the biggest thing facing our generation. For people who are in leadership positions now, sort of 30, 40, essentially we are the generation that's either going to do it or not do it with the energy transition. And I look at that and I go, what can I do to help? What can I do that will move the energy transition forward? And so I just keep going further and further into energy and more to renewables, with this focus of if we're not going to do it, no one else is. We basically have 25 years to get this right. And then, kids, grandkids are going to look at us as the generation that either did it or didn't do it. So that's quite a heavy weight for me. But what that allows me to do is if I've got a fit where the job I do matches my passions for energy and renewables, that allows you to bring something very different to the job in terms of passion and motivation, and you can bring that to your teams and to your results as well.
I love that. You're a man on a mission, Jim, and that's one of the things I really respect about you. And any particular sector in energy you're specifically interested in and looking to progress?
So the big one is renewables. There's a lot of complex things out there that we haven't solved the problem. When it comes to energy, we effectively have. We know that the answers are wind, plus solar, supported by flexible energy. And we really just in this stage, we just have to scale it as fast as possible, as cheaply as possible, with as many homes, as many businesses, and as many countries as fast as possible. There's lots of other tough problems to solve, but this one where it's really just about hitting pace and going at full stretch for the next 20 years to scale this up. So, and anything around solar and wind in particular, and that's where I am right now, is solar sales, and it's right in that sweet spot of how do we get customers to sign up to solar? How do we convince them to go faster, to go bigger, to go harder?
I love that. And you've worked in international markets, but today you're focused on the Australian market and the New Zealand market. Is that Australian market?
Yeah.
And so what's the state of solar energy in Australia today?
So Australia is a market leader in solar. We've been investing in it for a long time. Obviously, we're also a country with a lot of sun and great weather. So we're sort of blessed by a lot of the things that really make solar really good. It's a very mature market. Everyone understands it. Whether you believe in climate change or not, everyone understands that they're going to make money from it, that it's going to save on their energy bill. So it's a very mature market. And really we see a lot of fairly sophisticated buyers who have bought solar before, who understand it, who understand the ins and out, which means we have to meet them at that point of being quite a sophisticated seller and understanding the complexities of what we're selling and what they're buying.
How much renewable energy make up of the total energy distribution right now in Australia? Like, is it moving the needle really?
Oh, absolutely. So from an electricity perspective, depending on the state and the time, you're running sort of ballpark sort of 25% of the grids powered by renewables.
Okay.
You go somewhere like South Australia, it's the highest penetration of renewables in the world, and you'll go days where you can be pretty much 90% renewables with solar and wind. So Australia is a very mature market, and it's really starting to make a difference.
Is the technology standing all on its own, or is the government subsidizing a lot of the energy? Like, how's it working? What's the role of the government in regulating and subsidizing and promoting renewable energy?
It's both. Certainly the growth was very driven by subsidies. Also, there's various certificates which basically spreads the cost across everyone's electricity bills. Renewables tend to stand on their own at the moment, and they're also being supported and subsidized, which means that we can move fast. So a residential person can typically get a payback in 3 years, 4 years. Consumer business might be 4 or 5 years, and that's with the subsidies. Without subsidies, you'd probably be talking like maybe a 5 or 4.5, 5, 6 year payback period. So it still stacks up, still makes a lot of sense, but the subsidies just help us go faster and harder.
And is that your main sales argument when you're approaching a buyer, whether it's residential or commercial? Like, is that really what you lead with, the payback period?
It depends. So customers are. We know two things about customers in terms of their strong motivations. Everyone cares about cost, and some of them care about the environment. So what you tend to do is you go with two messages together. You definitely cost is always there, and you kind of sense out whether they care about the environment or not. Some people really care about the environment. That's their primary motivation, but you always know that they care about cost. And that's the same with businesses. You've got some people who are saying we just want to save money, and you've got some people who say our executives and our board have told us we have to do this and we have to do it in 3 months. So you get very different motivations across the board depending on where it is, but it typically is a mix of those two, cost and the environment.
Interesting. And when you say cost, so when someone commits to installing your technology, right? Obviously, there's new technology coming out every day.
Yeah.
So are you seeing people switching retailers? The technology is adaptable regardless of the retailer. Who owns the technology? How do you get, so how do you compete in the market, I guess, when cost is the main primary driver of the sale? Yeah,
so it's cost and quality. So people want to make sure that their lifetime, if they're investing something, it's not going to fail. There's not going to be problems. It's quite a commoditized market.
Yes.
Typically, you've got a range of different panels. Majority coming out of China. That's where the 90% of panels are produced, including the highest quality down to the cheapest, lowest quality. They all come out of the same location. So they tend to be fairly commoditized, which means you're competing more more on the quality of the install, the quality of your service, the quality of your relationship and the management of the customer, which makes it's a very, very kind of competitive kind of environment, and you don't have any market leaders. Typically I think the market leader has something like 3% of the market share.
Oh wow!
So it's
very fragmented.
Very fragmented, very, very fragmented market.
And does M&A play a role in your growth and how you're growing in the market?
Sorry?
M&A, mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah, absolutely. So you tend to see that companies either will buy capability. Our company, we bought some capability to build our kind of capability up quickly, sort of 4 or 5 years ago. But you're not seeing a consolidation.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. Which, from my view, I think paints a picture of whether there are diseconomies of scale in the solar market. Of it isn't necessarily clear that bigger is better, and that there's some advantages for smaller. It's also quite I mean, I could talk about the economics in the market of solar, like for as long as you want, if you want to go there. But yeah, it's a kind of complex market. It's also there's real advantage to being a bit more local, being closer to your customer. It's also an environment which encourages people to avoid quality, because it's quite opaque, so it's very easy to hide low quality and get a lower price, which tends to drive lots of kind of low quality sort of smaller players. We tend to play at a different end of the market, which is we back our brand, and customers expect us to have a certain degree of quality and safety and warranties and quality. So we tend to do that, and you see a few other players operate in that space as well.
Yeah, interesting. So you have an existing platform that has acquired capabilities. So as a go-to-market leader that's been brought in to really scale the go-to-market motion and scale revenue, and we talked about doubling revenue and the aggressive goals that we're seeing, and obviously it's a hot market. So how do you leverage a platform and the brand equity that you have in the market to channel it towards new lines of businesses like solar? So how do you think about that?
One of the things we were sort of testing, we had an expectation that people wanted to buy solar from us, and we found that they do. So we went to market with solar, and we had a very clear appetite from customers to have a strong relationship with our brand, and then were willing to buy solar from us. From there, it's really making sure you're backing up that brand, because if you're relying on a brand that sets certain expectations around trust and quality, you have to meet that. And people will trust you to do it, but then they're going to lose their trust very quickly if you're not meeting that. So and as I said, a lot of the competition is around that service quality, and that's where you compete. So that's a lot of our efforts are of how well can we support the customer, how quickly can we get the panels on roofs, and how do we make sure that customer experience is really good all the way through. Otherwise, you are consuming your brand rather than building your brand, which is not somewhere where you want to be.
So that's interesting. So when you're let me take a step back. Yeah. So when you first brought in to turn around the sales and go-to-market organization, what was the first thing that you kind of investigated to look into?
I mean, maybe let's go a bit more general. So I wouldn't necessarily describe the team I'm in as not necessarily a turnaround. We're essentially growing, and we're just kind of scaling and scaling. I certainly have done turnarounds in the past, and I think that's kind of where the question's going. For me, when I look at a turnaround for sales, it's the same as a turnaround for anything else. Largely, not quite. And I'll come back to that. It's always basics. I think if you've probably heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. What are the basics in a business? It's like, have you got good people? Are they being paid? Do they feel safe? Right. Do they have the basics of doing their job? Do they have the tools? Do they have good relationships with their leader? Like they're your basics, and then you build on there, and it's it might be coaching and sales flow and things like that, and then at the top you get all the flashy stuff, and it's really the fun stuff that sales and marketers want to do about go to market. And for me, I always come back to that: is you don't want to be building on sand. Is that to do the flashy stuff, you have to get the basics. So typically when I'm going into any organization, organization. It's like, where are we from the basics, and how do we make sure that we're building those basics and earning the right to do the really the cool stuff. And when you come into an organization, you're always assessing, like, I think a lot of leaders, when they come in, they often assume that everything's broken and they need to fix it. Whereas actually, I think it's really important to go, where are we? And I've had teams where I've come in and they're super high performing team, and my job is mainly to not mess it up and to keep them happy.
Sometimes it's hard to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. To keep the good performers there, and then you get to do all the flashy stuff, because you got the team and they're great and they're flying. Like, let's do the cool, exciting stuff. I've had other things where none of the basics are in place, and you're like, right, let's go straight back to basics and build. And I've had others where they're in the middle, or they're in the middle of a turnaround. And so how you kind of come into an organization really depends on where they are, and you need to meet them where they are today, rather than coming in and going, I'm going to fix everything because I know everything. Or conversely, going, oh, I'm just going to sit and watch for 3 months. That is equally a mistake, when sometimes you do need to get in there from day one. So that quickly assessing the organization, the current state, is really important for any turnaround or anything else. Yeah.
I love it. So maybe let's double click on this. So if we want to take a diagnostic approach to assessing the current state of a sales, and when we're saying sales motion, we're talking about attracting attention, generating the leads, and then converting those leads into sales. Maybe there's some expansion motion, especially on the commercial side, but maybe let's just for now talk about attraction and conversion. So if you were taking a more diagnostic approach to assessing the current state, and you're looking at the people, process, technology, data, walk me through your thought process of what are you looking, first of all, when you're looking at the people organization, what are you exactly looking for? And how do you know we're good at the basic? Define for me good at the basics. What does that look like?
Yeah, so I am over heavy on people. So lots of, you talk to a tech person, and they come in and they will come into an organization. They'll go like, think about the tech, and the tech will help us understand the people and the market and the customer. I come in the other way around. I go, right, let's start with the people. It's always the people, and then from the people you'll understand it, understand everything else. And everyone comes in differently. So for me, it's like day one, go and talk to people. What are you thinking? What are you worried about? Tell me your pain points, and then you just kind of go in with a very open mind and explore. And I'll be looking for the things that I think are basics, and they're things like, do people feel safe? Are they good at their job? Are they learning? Are they being coached? That's something that for me is always my sort of I guess magic weapon in any organization. Is, are people being coached? It's the thing that can change an organization faster than and more fundamentally than anything else, because then you've got people with skills talking to other people about their jobs, and that can change everything. So that tends to be and then you're just working through, do we have a fit to the market? Do we have a strong go-to-market approach? Do we understand our customers? Do the customers want our product? Which is the often missed. Do we have a product that people want? Do we have a competitive advantage? If so, what is it? And these are the kind of the fundamentals that you get out of any MBA or any business book, but typically you go into an organization and these are the basics that maybe aren't in place, and they're not clear on why the customer should buy from us versus anyone else, or they have the strategy, the running hard strategy. What do you do? Oh, we work really hard. It's like that's not a market strategy. So so that's the kind of the external facing, and then internal, it's people stuff, it's coaching. Do they have training? Do they have a sales flow? Do they have a sales process that they understand? What do the customers say? What are the customer pain points? Do we have process control? I mean, kind of for me, operations and sales operation and anything else, it's 100 things. Like there's the retail is detail. Like it's that. It's what do you need to get right? These are 100 things. But rather than trying to solve 100 things, I tend to go, let's get the people right first, and they'll do the rest.
So since you're really passionate about people, and it does come through, maybe let's zoom in on there. So when you say, you said, do people safe, and you said it multiple times. So can you just double click on that. What do you mean? Do they feel safe?
I mean, so there's a lot of, I'm sure you're familiar, I'm sure a lot of the listeners are, this kind of ideas of psychological safety. And these kind of come out of some of the work that Google was doing when they were trying to, I think Project Oxygen, trying to understand their workforce. And they said that this was one of the most important things for a team to perform is, do they feel safe? So, for example, if their boss gives them some feedback or tells them they're doing something wrong, how's that going to make them feel? That's often the test. If they go, my boss has got my back, he wants to support me, he's giving me some feedback, great, I'm gonna work on that, and also I trust him, and if I disagree with it, I'll tell him. Like, that's a sign of a safe environment. If I am scared of my boss, or I'm scared of the people I work with, or I can't disagree with people in a team because I feel stressed, so it's terrible for mental health, it's terrible for performance, people leave, and also you can't have the kind of the challenge and the disagreement and the kind of the workshopping that you need to solve problems. If you can't have these big debates out there and challenge and disagree, you're not going to solve the problems that an organization has. So
I love that. And how do you go about creating a safe culture where feedback is looked at as something positive and constructive and not a personal attack? I mean, and especially when working with the global workforce, which we'll get into in a little bit. But how do you build a safe environment?
So again, like, this is leadership for me is like, it's like an art. It's our craft. Like, people spend 20, 30 years building their craft. So how do you build a safer environment? It's like, how does an expert painter paint a building? Like, like, it's with all the expertise that we've built up. I mean, I think a few things would be, if I just had to jump out. I think one is sometimes there's bad apples in an organization, people who discourage safety and make people feel afraid, and you very quickly need to assess, are they behaving poorly because of an environment, something that can change? Is this something they can change quickly, or do I need to change these people out? So I do find that poor behaviors driven by poor leaders can often be one of the most immediate and damaging sort of drivers of a lack of safety. So that's often where you need to go first. And then for yourself, it's about building trust. And it's the hundreds of ways where you show people that they can trust you, that if they tell you a problem, you're not going to criticize and make them feel bad. You're going to help, that you're there to support, that you build rapport with them in the same way you build with customers, and you're constantly trying to build trust in 100 ways. And that's why I go back to coaching. If everyone in the organization has some idea of good coaching and is regularly having coaching conversations with their people, that builds an environment where these kind of trust and these kind of relationships get built.
And one of the things that we're big at here is really being very cognizant and aware of what we call the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's a very popular framework that's out there, and at the very base, like you said, it's trust. If there is no trust, right, people don't feel safe to voice out their concerns. Feedback is taken as personal attack. There's no debates that happen. If there's no debates happening, if your ideas are not voicing out, the second layer is there's no commitment. If and it just it has a rippling effect. And one of the things that I found to work for us as a new leader when I came in as CEO and to start really take the business and drive the growth is vulnerability. Was an operative word, especially in the culture that we're in the Philippines. People are not typically confrontational, so it's really hard for you to just come in and, hey, give me feedback, tell me what's wrong, let's go get it right. That's that. I tried that and it didn't work. Like, let's go. That dominant driver, like, let's get shit done. Actually, kind of a little bit at first fired again, and to your point, there were some bad apples, which they really leveraged my maybe too aggressive approach and even created more dysfunction, because then that created cliques, right? He's really, he's changing things. Why is he now? We used to be very happy to how we were operating. Now, how come we're operating differently and whatnot? So then, I started I realized that I really need to take a step back a little bit and start understanding at a deep level what makes someone feel safe or not safe. And if I'm coming in hot and calling people out, and hey, I expect you to give me feedback. We need to have a culture of radical honesty and thoughtful disagreement. You tell me what you think, I tell you what you think. We disagree, then we come up with the best idea, and then we go execute. That didn't work. So we had to really slow down and get vulnerable about, okay, what are the mistakes that, and a lot of it also through storytelling, right? And me being vulnerable and about, hey, what are my concerns are? What am I seeing that's not working? And maybe also share some of my experiences and just connect with people at the one-on-one human level and start building that trust and letting people voice out their concerns, and also understanding each other's personalities played a big role. So we had a whole workshop around understanding our disc profile, how you operate, how I operate, right? Here are my blind spots. Here's what I'm great at. Hey, I don't expect you, Jim, to be Yassine. Right? I want to know what Jim makes you tick, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and I want you to know what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. And I'm very, very transparent. Hey, I'm a guy that is fast. Sometimes I'm low on details. I don't look at all the facts, right? And I have a very high sense of urgency, which makes me, and I'm very passionate. I'm very vocal, which sometimes it comes across that aggressive or maybe condescending, because I'm like, let's go. There's no time to waste. There's no complaints. Let's just get shit done. So then people started to understand where I'm coming from, because I understood where they're coming from. So you find a lot of people, interestingly enough, when it did the profiling, a lot of people were what we call C, conscientious, and supportive. So they're slow, they're methodological, and me, I'm an ID, I'm a dominant and influencer. So I'm like fast, aggressive, result oriented, and that just really really we bumped heads, right? Our culture just collided, from what I was trying to bring to the table and what I knew the business needed and what the business really required. So how big of a role does understanding each other's blind spots and being vulnerable play in building a safe environment for you and your experience?
So there's a lot to unpack. There's a lot to unpack there. I'd probably go down to the some of the cultural stuff, particularly around kind of conflict and pull on some of the strings there. A way I like to think of it is, if you're communicating, you have to communicate to how the other person's going to receive it. I mean, that's communication 101, and cross-culturally you have the same thing. So when it takes things like disagreement or challenge, I used to try and have a number system. So say if I was gonna criticize someone in Australia and I was really mad, like maybe that would be a 9 out of 10, and that's probably like swearing and all things like that. You don't want to go there in a professional environment. But say if I was going to say, hey, right, I think this is a real problem. I think we need to change this, or else we're not going to succeed. And I think you've got a really important part to play, and you have to change that. In Australia, that's maybe a 5 or a 6. Like, it's pretty direct, but it's not. You could certainly go high. You certainly go higher than that. In the Philippines, that's probably a 12.5. Like, if I said that to a Filipino, they'd be like, whoa, like, why is he so mad? So if I'm intending it to land as a 5 and I get it to land as a 12, I haven't achieved my communication message. The flip side is a 6 out of 10 to a Filipino through hierarchy to someone, their boss, could be, hey Yassine, I've been looking at this after a bit of an introduction. I've been looking at this. I think maybe there's some things we need to think about. It's going well, but I think maybe we could consider this. That's a 7. If you hear it about at a 1, then that's a problem going the other way, because you're like, everything's great. He told me it's good. And so then what you have is a very common cultural dynamic between more direct and less direct cultures, where one group of people is going, I've said there's a problem and no one's listening, and the other group going, no one's telling me there's a problem. There's clearly a problem. And it's a translation issue across culture. So for you to communicate, you go, well, what am I trying to land? And I go, right, I want this to land as a 5. So Filipinos, I'm going to present it this way, and that will land as a 5. And you kind of test and it's touch and feel with culture. It's like, I'm looking at the expression, like, is their expression, like, are they taking it really, like, a little bit hard? Are they taking it really hard? You're kind of constantly balancing how do I land my message where I want? So that allows you to communicate as clearly as I want and to have it land exactly as clearly as I would like. Because otherwise a lot of people think that you're just running around at a 15 out of 10 conflict all the time, and that's just your natural.
And that's where I operate, right? So I had to slow it down a little bit because my executive team and my leadership team kept giving me feedback like, and I'm used to working with Westerners where we're very direct and you get stuff done, but then here coming on the ground, I did struggle with that a little bit, but then realized that I need to seek to understand before I seek to be understood, and I have to realize that yes, there are cultural differences and not everyone is the same. It's not like why don't they get it, it's like how am I seeing it in a way that they're not getting it, rather than just put it, because there's no usefulness in putting it on the other side, right? You have no control how what I can, like what you're going to do and how you're going to perceive it, and how you're going to respond to it. But what I can control is my communication to you.
And I think this is, so some people think they need to dial it back. So what I'm not saying is challenge less. I'm not saying challenge less, push less. I'm saying translate it. Is literally as if you're speaking a different language. Translate it so it lands with the same amount of challenge that you want. And I think that's because sometimes people back away from conflict, and that's also the wrong approach. I've been in environments where conflict's handled really poorly, and there's two choices. Either you have conflict, which is people outright arguing and upsetting each other and not feeling safe, or everyone just avoids it. And that again is not the right way. You've got to go, how can we have conflict across culture where we can challenge and listen and disagree and be heard and all of these things in a way that is safe? And that's the really interesting and fun piece. And again, running across cultures or language or distance or age or it just adds an extra complexity. Like doing this stuff is hard when you're all from the same culture. It's now doubly or triply hard when you're doing it in a different culture as well, which is why it's fun, right?
And does it come from experience? Is there a book we can read about it to download all of this knowledge? Because it's really make it or break it.
Okay.
Especially in a sales organization where at the heart of it is people. As far as we know, AI hasn't yet replaced humans, and that won't be the case for any time soon. If there's a sale to happen, at least a high-ticket sale like energy or whatnot, you still need to have two people talking with each other, and you still need to build a team and nurture it and scale it. So how do you get your leaders there?
So I do a lot of work on this because I typically work in an environment where we have offshore teams, or I've got folks who are working. So a big part of what I bring to my role is how do I coach people across kind of cultural intelligence in terms of something.
Cultural intelligence.
That's what I would Google. There's a TED talk on cultural intelligence by a female author who I can't recall her name right now, but we might better add it later.
We'll add it in footnotes.
And she's written a book, same title, Cultural Intelligence.
Wow.
Really, really good. But the main way you do it is you go into another culture and you mess it up. Literally every single person who I've met who's come to the Philippines has messed it up in their first 6 months. What makes a difference is that some of them keep messing it up or leave, and other people go, whoa, okay, that hasn't worked for me. And what I find is that people who have worked in another culture successfully are now in a much better position just otherwise, because you just build this skill set around communication and culture and understanding there's lots of different ways of doing things. So I would recommend, if anyone has an opportunity to work in a different culture or to work in a different country, to take it with both hands, because for me it's a really formative development experience that sort of changed my thinking on leadership.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm definitely looking it up. The other thing that you mentioned before we move on from the people aspect is coaching. what does good coaching look like? Everyone has their own definition. What's your definition of a good coaching?
So I think for me, I'll answer it in a different way. So coaching is one of those just fundamental leadership skills, and it's another one of those you can learn it and get good at it in a day or a couple of days. Read a book. To master it is a lifetime of work. It's something I would encourage everyone to embark on that leadership journey. One of the challenges with coaching is it's like interviewing. Everyone thinks that they know how to coach. Everyone thinks they know how to interview, and actually most people starting out are really bad at both. And so you really need to approach coaching with some humility of like, this is a really fundamental, complex skill, and I'm not good at it now, and I'm going to learn it. A lot of it is getting to the basics is having a coaching structure. What is my intent out of this coaching session? How am I going to approach this coaching session? You do that, you get most of the way there, and then from there,
the prep work.
Yeah,
it's really what happens before the coaching session, not during the coaching session.
Absolutely, and any large organization should have a coaching methodology that they use. Some people use Grow, some people use their own in-house coaching structure, and it talks about a preparation and how you talk about the problem and how you're going to turn it into action, and they're the basics, and having a structure gets you a long way there. And then beyond it, it's the art of understanding where someone's coming from. How do you attack someone's biases or thought patterns or problem thinking in a way that you can get them to think slightly differently and approach the world in a different way, or have a different action. So like for me, again, coaching's like art. It's the same. Like there's some of these things that we do in leadership, like sales, like coaching, like written communication, like managing our relationships and our stakeholders. These are kind of the fundamental skills which everyone can do a little bit, but to progress in your career, you want to get really, 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 really good at all of them. And coaching, it's just one of those. It's an art rather than something that you just kind of do.
And what does the coaching cadence look like? Is it like scheduled coaching, or is it more like, okay, when they screw up, I'll coach them, or if they're underperforming, like how do you think about the cadence of coaching?
I think you should always have a coaching cadence. My go-to with leadership folks is I typically would have a 30-minute one-on-one every week, and then I'd have some sort of longer sessions set up regularly in different formats. In something like a contact center, you probably be running maybe 2 or 3 times a week to just get really fast turnaround on behaviors.
And that's at the agent level, not at the manager.
Yeah, so team leads, coaching agent should be 2 or 3 times a week. Beyond that, at least once a week. It's one of the things that you come into any organization, you'll find that oftentimes coaching doesn't exist, or it isn't structured. And just getting people in a room and going, let's talk once a week does wonders. Doing it better with structure and the art and all of that does even more. But just getting together and having an opportunity to talk about what's going on is really powerful. And many organizations to this day don't have that. They don't have regular one-on-ones with their leaders and with their teams. I would also say you have to do all the others, like coaching as soon as you see something. So you see something in a meeting, you pull them aside, like, hey, this could have done a little bit like this. So that kind of coaching all the time on the go. And obviously if someone is performing poorly or there's a significant problem, then you would be much more deliberate and systematic about how you approach that problem, and that's probably more time and more effort. But it's always on the go all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Mark Roberge, I don't know if you've heard of Mark Roberge. He's the chief revenue officer that scaled HubSpot. HubSpot that
we use HubSpot.
Probably use he was the guy that got HubSpot to $100 million. From a startup to $100 million, and he released an ebook. It's called Scaling Up, The Science of Scaling Up. I recommend everyone to get it. But one of the interesting things he found out in his experience that there are a lot of traits for a sales, a high-performing sales rep, right? The drive, the passion, the communication, right? Objection handling, all of that. But what he really, when he analyzed all of his reps, and he tried to correlate behavioral, not so much the skills, because skills are learnable, but he looked at the behavioral aspects of it. He found that coachability is the number one trait for a high-performing sales rep. So for you, what are the most important traits of a high-performing sales rep?
I think
what makes a high-performing sales rep for you?
So coachability. I would agree with that. Like the ability to kind of grow and to self-reflect. That's certainly a big part of it. For me, it's one of those interesting ones. So I've come from a lot of environments where it's not sales, and I come into sales, and I kind of bring that. It's about the basics, and there's a lot of things that are the same in sales and operations in any environment. But sales also has that 10%, which is the sales. When people say sell the sizzle, not the steak. That 10% is the sizzle. And I think salespeople have to have that. It's still 10%. You can without the basics, the sizzle won't get you there, and you have to have all the basics of like good communication, good behaviors, good people, good values. They listen, they work hard, all of those things. But you also, to be a great salesperson, you have to have that sizzle as well. I still don't know if that can be taught or coached. Everyone tends to think not. I haven't actually necessarily solved that in my head yet, because my view is always everything is learnable and teachable, and we can always change everything. But there does seem to be a little bit of that sizzle, which is you kind of either have it or you don't. So,
and how do you identify that sizzle? Is it interview or once you put them in the field?
Like you see it,
right?
Like it's pretty easy. It's pretty to see. It's the high energy. It's the drive. It's things like that. And you can have your interview questions around it. I have a great interview question for drive, which is one of my favorite, which is
let us in on the secret.
Tell me about a time where you had to work really hard for something over a long time that was really important to you, and this can be inside or outside of work. And if people don't have an answer, it doesn't mean they're a no, but occasionally you get these answers and you're like, holy, I am hiring you on the spot. Like an answer that is like,
what's the best answer you got?
The best one was we were hiring for, it was kind of financial role of some sort, I can't remember exactly, and she said, I dropped out of university because I couldn't afford to go. So over the last 6 years, I've been attending night school to finish my CPA, and I've been sleeping like 4 hours a night because I'm raising my four siblings, and I worked through it, and I got there eventually. And you're like, why did you do it? And it was like, because I started this, and I told myself I was going to do this, and it was just like, and I wouldn't have found that, but it was just the level of drive and commitment that showed. And so of course, amazing. Of course, we hired her.
Yes, that's awesome, and she proved to be a high performer.
Yeah, of course,
that's awesome. And I lied about moving on from the people side, because it's fine. Just so fascinating. So when it comes to building a sales organization, how do you think about structure? Do you structure them in pods? For every 5 sales reps, you have 1 sales manager. For every 3 sales manager, you have 1 sales director. How do you structure the people organization in a sales team? How do you think about that?
I think this is really one. With a lot of things, people tend to go, well, this is the right way of doing things. And I think one of the most important things that a sales leader or anyone can have is going, well, what is the environment? What are we actually selling? What are we working on here? So, and it tends to work on a bit of a spectrum, for example. So if you're selling something that takes, 3 minutes to sell, then how you structure the organization is going to be very different. If you're selling 747s that takes 5 years to sell.
What's the difference? So when you say there's difference, what would be the difference?
It's just so in terms of take things like a sales call. Your sales flow is very different depending on the scale.
Right.
In terms of things like support, it's again how complex, how much other work there is. So I've been in environments where you might have 15 reps and 1 leader, and for the only thing that leader needs to do is coach those reps. They've got HR, they've got support, they've got things like that. There's no offline work. It's all, and then I've got other environments where, say solar, where there is a lot of complex support work that has to go on around the sale of just making sure
because
that
of the technical nature
of the
product.
it's technical, because you've got technical work, people need support around designs, people need work getting installations done, and so your kind of support ratios would be very different. But it's really going, what is the leadership value add that I want out of this? Do I want them to coach? Do I want them to support on complaints? Do I want to support on post-sale? Do I want them to support on admin and engagement or anything else? But being really being again very deliberate. What are my leaders doing? And then based on what I need my leaders to do, how many do I need? What ratios do I need? And things like that. So you kind of design from fundamentals up rather than going, there's one best way of
I want to pick up on something you said, admin. What's your take on admin? Do you just hire VAs, virtual assistants, for all of your sales reps? Do you have them do it? Like, no, this is part of the job. What do you go about admin work? How do they deal with that?
I think it really depends, and again, it's like, who's best to do this job at what price. So there's clearly something. Again, it's a spectrum. There's some things which are clearly low value, repeatable. Get someone to do it. Get someone to do
transactional.
Get someone to do it at a fairly low price, and just get them to do it. There's other things where actually, complex sales, where a lot of complex salespeople will think the contract and the legal stuff is admin, but that's the hard work. That's what you're selling. You're not selling the product. You're selling a contract to sell a product. And so and often you find salespeople don't like to do admin. Yeah. So you got to go, well, are they adding value? Who is best placed to do this work? Who is best placed to get this right? And what happens if they get it wrong? And again, that tends to go, do you put this on the low value, kind of take it away from the sales team, or do you go, right, this is high value and really important, and I need to put it up at the front end with people who know the customer and know the customer's needs. So again, it depends. My answer to this entire podcast would be it depends.
No, but there's a lot of wisdom there, because it does differ depending on your sales motion, the ACV, the transaction value, the people that you're selling, B2B or B2C, the complexity of the contract and all. No, I 100% agree. And how do you marry? One of the things that I really admire about you is you've built global teams. You didn't just, build a sales team in Australia, but you've built, sales team in Australia, teams here in the Philippines and all around the world. So how do you create a high-performing global team? How do you establish that dynamic between an onshore, someone who's in Australia, but they have also salespeople here in the Philippines? How do you marry the two?
Yeah. So I probably. Well, there's a lot of strings to pull on there. I'm going to pull on two strings.
Okay.
So one, I'm going to come back to how I started this, which is around the energy transition, climate change. Every single report that we look at shows that we don't have enough skilled people to drive the energy transition. And we're talking millions and millions of people. We're probably talking, in Australia, we're going to be 2 million people short of skilled tradespeople to manage the transition.
And those are the electricians, the solar engineers,
solar designs, solar draftspeople. Like, literally the job list is long, but they're technical, high skill, highly intelligent people who need to do this complex energy work. You go to America, you go globally, it's exactly the same story. So we have this massive skills shortage. At the same time, we see that globally we completely underutilize skilled, educated people from the developing world or from poorer countries. Engineers who are 4 or 5 year engineers who are not working in engineering because they can't get those roles, or they move to another country and they work in sales or a restaurant or something like that. So we have this massive skills shortage, and we have this massive underutilization, which is the largest waste of human talent in history, of these millions and millions of highly skilled folks from the Philippines and from other countries who are just ready to do this work, who are not being hired in these high skilled jobs. So for me, these two things, like, we have to solve this problem, and that's really where I see a lot of my kind of passion is what are the problems that I want to solve. The reason why that's hard is all the things we talked about. We talked about cultural barriers. We talked about distance. We talked about, well, we haven't talked about, but bias and racism. There's one of the reasons that people in offshore teams don't necessarily get the support and the successful they need is because a lot of their managers are racist and they have bias, and it's unexamined. So that comes into my second point, is that managing global teams well, you can't shy away from discussions around bias and racism and gender and sexuality and race and culture. Like, you have to lean into this so heavy, because this is the work. So you've got that opportunity of like massive skilled resource not being used. You've got this massive like global challenge that we need to solve, and the kind of right in the middle of that is this kind of this doing the work around bias and racism and how people interact, because we're not going to solve these problems if we don't do that work. And so when I've seen teams work well globally, it's where you've got people who have done some of that work or are willing to do it. So when I talk to people and say, hey, like, your assumptions here are a little bit racist, some people will get upset and react, and they're not coachable on this, and other people will go, wow, I never really thought about that. Let me understand more. Let me do the work. And that allows you to build teams where the people in the Philippines, for example, and the people in Australia are viewed as peers who all work together. Often you see this weird dynamic where offshore is offshore and they're just kind of treated as the other, and they're not really, you don't give them the same respect and rights and support and friendship and communication as you would with the folks onshore. And you're never going to build a successful team that way.
So I love that, but is there a case to be made? Are you better off hiring people who are culturally in tune with the customer they're selling to, versus really having a distributed global team? Is there a business case to make? Have you seen a difference in performance when you had a dedicated and we're talking about salespeople, right? I don't know, there's a lot of shortage of salespeople. Definitely the skilled ones, in any industry, skilled folks are hard to find. But have you find that there is a business case to be made, having a global sales team versus an onshore focused sales team?
Yeah, I mean, I view it as like distance in the same way. So all other things being equal, you would rather have someone who could sit in the same office with you and have a chat. You can't always have that, which means that you're right, we can make it work, we can do remote, we can do it overseas. Culturally, it's often the same. You go, the being in the same culture allows you to communicate better. Communication is easier. So all things being equal, you would rather have people with the same culture as the people you're selling to. But all things aren't equal, because we have a much greater opportunity, we have a much greater skill set. So if I could hire someone who is maybe actually at a lower price point for a start, but has a higher education level, higher technical skill set, higher drive, better overall communication skills, more coachable, better values, versus who's from a different culture, they're like 9 out of 10 of the things I want, versus someone who might be only 1 or 2 out of 10. I would pick that offshore person anytime. So it's not like you can just wave it away and say that cultural differences aren't important or they aren't a problem. They certainly are, but they're not an insurmountable problem, and they don't outweigh all of the other really, really good reasons why you might want to go to another country for talent.
I love that. So if we want to get a little bit tactical, so let's assume you've done the cultural integration. Both teams are playing nice, mutual respect, we're peers. How do you think about roles and responsibilities in a sales process? So do you have, outbound people in the Philippines doing outbound calls, and then they're, they're qualifying leads, they're working through lists, and then they're handing the leads off to your field sales or, closing. How do you think about this whole roles and responsibilities, and what's the optimal structure?
Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily split structure onshore, offshore. The approach I'd like to take with offshoring or going to another country is do it as much as possible. So there isn't say you've got 20 people, the answer is not 4 offshore, 16 onshore. The answer is as many offshore people as we can do at the right level of quality and the right level of skill. And so sometimes that'll be, we hire 3, and actually we find the barriers are making it harder to train up, and actually we're going to stick with 3. Other times you go, right, with 3, and then you promote them and they do great. You go, right, let's go to 6, let's go to 9, let's go to 12, because of all those advantages. advantages. So I tend to kind of try and scale up, but based on what I'm actually seeing in front of me.
Okay, makes sense.
And the reality is that often you can go for the lower skill. You can often start there. So typically you would start with more kind of lower skill stuff overseas, but that doesn't mean you have to. And then you build from there, and you're basically trying to get them up the skill curve as fast as possible. And that's something I see in particular, is that one of the lots of people view offshore teams as they're always only ever going to be entry level, and you don't have that career progression. You don't have the opportunity to take on bigger roles, and that for me is a mistake. Is you should be looking at your offshore team as your talent. They're your entry level talent, and your job is to see whether they're going to stay entry level, or see how do I develop them up into more senior positions.
And in what instance have you, like, okay, I hired my first 3, it didn't work, let's stop there. And then in another scenario, it's like I hired the first 3, it worked great, let's scale it. Can you just draw that?
Well, I'm in the middle of one now. We've just we hired some more junior sales folks, sort of sales support type folks, and really.
So what do they do? Sales.
So they do some outbound. They call customers about different issues. They're working.
So it's voice.
Yeah, some voice.
Admin.
It's a bit of both. Some voice. They're doing some stuff around like forms and designs and things like that. So pretty high skill, and it requires them to be able to talk to customers really well as well. We found some real superstars there, and we're going, right, can we do sales, more complex sales in that, and we're in the middle of promoting our first person, who, you talk about the sizzle of who has that sales sizzle, and you recognize it. So this person clearly has it, and so going, right, let's see how it goes. Let's see what the barriers are. Let's see what works. Let's see whether those cultural barriers are going to be too much of an impediment, or does all the 9 out of 10 other things that this person have, does that outweigh it? I think it's going to be that one, and I think we're going to be able to prove that we can do complex sales across cultural barriers here in the Philippines, and I'm really excited by that.
I love it, and I'm excited. Maybe maybe in 3 months, 6 months time, we can do another podcast with an update on how it worked, and maybe use that more as a use case. But to bring it home, so how you're passionate about these things, and I really admire that about you. So how is building a global team progressing the distribution of renewable energy, so that we're fighting global warming, so to bring it to a nice end here?
It's just you can read any report. You search energy transition, jobs, skills report, energy in your country, and you'll get 4 or 5 reports that are going to say the same thing. I'll predict it for every country. I know Australia, I know the UK, I know the US. You look up any country in the world, you ask the same question, and they'll say we have a shortage of skilled people. So we have to go from here to here to here in terms of deployment of renewable energy, deployment of new grid infrastructure, deployment of batteries and the next technology, deployment of energy efficiency and energy usage and energy products, and energy management. There's a whole range of things that we have to do. Like, if we do not do these things in the next 15-20 years, then the world is going to be an absolutely dire place. To do those things, we need millions of skilled people. Those millions of skilled people don't exist. Lots of businesses go, well, we're not short of, we can just pay a little bit more, but it's musical chairs. You're just moving the few skilled people around. You're stealing talent. You're moving the same few people around, and so maybe you deliver your project.
Inflation. You're driving wages. It's just.
Yeah, and you might deliver your project, but you've pulled people out, which means another project slowed down. So when I come into renewables, I'm not here to just to get another solar panel. They could buy it from A, or they buy it from me. What I want to do is to get someone to buy solar that didn't exist before. So I want to have create a new customer. When we run a project, I don't want it to be my project or someone else's project. I want this project, and I want that project, and I want that project, because we have to do all of it. It's the renewable transition is the everything everywhere all at once, and the global talent is part of that everything all at once picture. Because if you don't get the talent that's here in the Philippines, the hundreds of thousands of engineers who graduate every year who don't work in engineering, if you can't find a way to get them in to the energy transition, then we're just not going to hit those numbers, and that's unacceptable for me.
Like I said, man, you're a man on a mission, and I am honored to be on this journey with you. And I'm excited to see how we can progress, renewable energy, and this global outlook to how you look at building teams and building organizations that really make an impact. So I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. I could literally go for another 2-3 hours. I had all sorts of questions I wanted to ask Jim, but he pulled me in talking about people. It is at the core of every organization, right? Otherwise, it will be empty offices. And as we say at Origo, we're in the business of unlocking human potential. And by working with global go-to-market leaders like Jim, I think we're making a lot of progress there. So now I want to turn it over to you. How do you go about building a high-performing sales organization? Have you considered about leveraging a global team? How do you think about structure, compensation, even profiling salespeople? So I'm really curious to hear your input and your experience on this subject. So leave me a comment in the thread below, and I would love to go back and forth and add more depth to this episode. With that said, Jim, it's been an honor, brother, having you on this podcast. And again, you're pioneering the go-to-market section or topic in this podcast, and I'm looking forward to having you again in 3 to 6 months once you've scaled your program, and we can follow up on that and see how you're doing.
All right, love it.
Love it. Thank you so much. Amazing.